And we start with this, a face-to-face meeting between officials from both Russia and Ukraine and Turkey. The topic on the table, of course, a peace deal. These talks are the first of their kind as the two countries have not held direct negotiations in over 3 years. So here is what we are learning so far. The two sides have agreed to an exchange of up to 1,000 prisoners. That is according to the head of Moscow's peace talk delegation. But speaking today at a summit in Albania, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy had this to say about the meeting. Listen.
This war Russia against Ukraine must be ended as soon as possible and in a just way. Ukraine needs peace. Peace in Europe depends on whether Ukraine will get it. All of you know that this week we had a real chance to take important steps toward ending this war, if only Putin had not been afraid to come to Turkey. I was in Ankara yesterday, and thanks for participation and hosting us, President Erdogan. And I was ready for a direct meeting with Putin, whether in Ankara or in Istanbul, and not just for a meeting, but to resolve all the important issues to my mind. But he didn't agree to anything, Putin. And you can also see that the Russian delegation that came to Istanbul is of a very low level. None of them are people who actually make decisions in Russia. Still, I send our team to Istanbul, led by Ukraine's Minister of Defense, at least to see if those Russians can actually decide anything. Our number one priority is a full, unconditional and honest ceasefire.
Now, remember, we learned this week that Russian President Vladimir Putin and President Zelenskyy would be no-shows for the sit-down. One person who did have a seat at the table, Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Here's what he said yesterday when he was asked about how the talks would go.
I frankly do not believe that we're going to have a breakthrough here until President Trump sits face-to-face with President Putin and determines what his intentions are moving forward.
And this morning, while on Air Force One, a reporter asked President Trump when he would meet with Putin. Here's what he said.
Are you putting to call Vladimir Putin? How do you think you can get those talks on track?
We have to meet. He and I will meet. I think we'll solve it, or maybe not, but at least we'll know. And if we don't solve it, it'll be very interesting.
All right, let's bring in CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer. Elizabeth, good to see you on 24/7 today. What are we learning about how these negotiations went so far? Any breakthroughs?
Certainly no breakthroughs. The main achievement seems to have been that both sides have agreed to swap prisoners of war, 1,000 each. But given that prisoner swaps have been going on the whole time, it's not a very significant achievement and certainly not a breakthrough. You heard President Zelenskyy there making the point that the Russians had not sent a very high-level delegation to Istanbul. They sent a presidential aide and the head of Russian military intelligence. And he wanted to make the point that he'd sent his defense minister and his foreign minister because they really were ready to deal. And in fact, in the end, there was nothing concrete emerged. We're hearing from various sources that the Russian demands for any kind of ceasefire were completely unacceptable, and they included the Ukrainian troops withdrawing from areas that they already control so the Russians could move in. Of course, that's a complete non-starter.
Yeah, so we know President Zelenskyy has been very vocal about these talks on social media. He also says he spoke to President Trump over the phone. Have we heard yet from Russia and President Putin?
We have not. That phone call between President Zelenskyy and various European leaders seems to have been a signal to President Trump that there was real solidarity there, that Ukraine was in a position to deal, it was serious, and that the United States heft is really needed to make President Putin budge. The Russians have made vague noises about, yes, President Putin will indeed be willing to meet President Trump, but of course it's going to take a long time to set up and be very complicated. So certainly the mood music from the Russian camp is we're playing for time.